Namaste. Good evening and welcome to the 9th edition of the Amazing Ability webinar series. I am Mamataji, serving as a vocational training coordinator under Comprehensive Care Support and Treatment for Persons with Disability program at Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's episode where we celebrate one more unstoppable achiever, Ms. Shalini Saraswati. SUIM is a development organization engaged in building a new civil society in India and serving over 3 million people in Karnataka through 40 plus projects, 7 institutions, and 100 plus partners across the domains of health, education, socio-economic empowerment program, and training and research. This webinar is jointly hosted by SUIM's CCST program and Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, we lead. SUIM's Comprehensive Care Support and Treatment for Persons with Disability program, initiated in 2018, stands all 21 types of disability and engages with over 40,000 specially abled individuals in Mysuru and Kodagu district. WeLead's mission is to develop human and social capital for nation building by enhancing the potential of individuals and institutions across the development sectors. WeLead engages across 4 sectors: government, NGOs, corporates, and communities youth. Specially abled people face several issues, including accessibility, inclusion, and the inability to lead a barrier-free life. One of the ways in which a light can be thrown on these issues is by celebrating the amazing achievements of sunset of fantastic individuals from this group who have broken through the barriers and inspired not just people from their own group but also all of us. This webinar is an attempt to bring some of these celebrities onto a platform where they can share their journey, their determination, and the fire that burns within them that has made them into role model for all of us. I will now hand it over to Mr. Ramesh Venkataraman, Director of WeLead, to introduce our unimaginable achiever, Ms. Shalini Saraswati. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mamta. It's a pleasure to have Shalini as our guest today. And Shalini Saraswati is an adventure enthusiast, a Blade Runner, marathoner, public speaker, and deputy general manager at First Source Solutions. In 2012, Shalini was returning from a vacation in Cambodia. And when a fever changed her life, what began as a mild illness turned out to be rickettsial moths, a rare bacterial infection. In the months that followed, she lost her baby, survived multiple organ failure, and slipped into a coma. 4 days later, she awoke to unresponsive limbs. Shalini went on to lose all 4 of her limbs, becoming a quadruple amputee. And the next few months were spent in the journey of self-discovery, learning to redefine the rhythms and routines of everyday life. But her determination, never said die attitude, brought her to athletics. We will be exploring her life journey. This is going to be a conversation as opposed to typically how the Amazing Achievers program runs. So we'll do a little bit of a back and forth here. And I must also add that Shalini is a recipient of many awards, including the Iconic Woman Award, Rashtriya Swayam Siddha Samman, and the Kittur Rani Chennamma Award by the Women and Child Department, Government of Karnataka. And like I said, we will learn more during the conversation. I hope you can hear me clearly, Shalini.
Yeah, I think if you can keep your earphone near you, then it's a lot more clearer.
Yeah. Shalini, the first question is, one of the things I've noticed in your videos as well as your talks is not just acceptance, but also a deep and settled peace. Even during the earlier conversation, you seem to be secure with who you are. So how did this transition happen, and what or who helped you get to where you are today?
I think it's a journey, isn't it, for all of us? Like whether good things happen or bad things happen to all of us. I think we're all on a journey, and the faster we can get to a state of acceptance, it's easier to lead your life, right? Like
Shalini, I must tell
if
you that
I'm
you're
unhappy
cutting
with
out a
my
little.
disability and whatever has happened, okay, not really sure. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Just give me a moment. I'll just check for my internet.
Yeah.
Just give me a moment. I'll switch networks and see if that helps. Just give me 1 minute.
Yeah, I can hear you better now.
I think it's like just going in and out a bit, and it's a bit weird. Are you okay now?
Yeah, it's better now. Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying, like, you know, the fact is that you if I'm unhappy or not making peace with where I am, then I'm always going to be unhappy, right? Or I'm never ever going to be content with life. And I feel that it's the only way that you can lead your life. The fact that there will be good stuff that will happen, there will be bad stuff that will happen, and then you just move forward as much as you can. You try and live your life to the best possible thing that you can, and that's the only thing that you can do for all of us, like whether you have a disability or not, you know.
Yeah, true. I think most of us are disabled in some way or the other. So yeah, like I said, I think most of us are disabled in some way or the other, even if we aren't
Absolutely.
disabled in the classical sense of the term as it is used. So
I think, like, you know, for I read this somewhere, there are only two kinds of people in the world. One is people with disability, and one is with people who haven't as yet discovered their disability. Because I think, other than death, the only other reality for all of us is disability, right? Like, as we get older, for sure that you're not going to be able to see better, hear better, walk better, and all of those are disabilities, and that's the only truth other than death in life. So yeah, so you know, like, if you haven't got, if you don't have a disability, then you know, you still haven't discovered it. I think that's about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. So if I had to put something to it, it's like you you realize that you progressively become disabled, not necessarily specially abled. I mean,
True.
so, uh, but I just have a follow-up question on that. It's easier said than done. I mean, to be honest,
Absolutely.
It's all very well to say that most of us have to go. All of us have to look to the future, accept what's come our way, and move forward. But clearly, I think it would help if you could articulate the specific journey itself in terms of what it was, and I mean who you were versus who you are now. In the sense, I think it would help people who are not just people who are going through that, but also generally everyone who, like you said, is going through some phase in life where they need to get to terms with what they are.
Yeah. So see, like, until 2012, like, I was an able-bodied person, right? So for me, it was a life where I went to work, or I did everything that was possible, right? Like, you lead, like, you feel a very tick in the box approach, that I would say, where you're thinking about what are the goals that you want to achieve in your life. And I was working in a corporate. I was doing well for myself. We had bought a house. I was pregnant. So for me, like, everything was like a little, like, it just felt like, you know, life was going through the course that we've always taught to us that life should be like, right? That it's a normal course. So when I did fall sick, and I had to go through amputation in various phases, it wasn't like I lost all of my limbs at the same shot. I bacterial infection, and the doctors did tell me that I might have to lose my limbs. But I think as a family, we wanted to try everything that was possible. So amputation happened in various phases over a 2-year period. So I was bedridden for 2 years, and so when I lost my first hand, I had to amputate, I think, in March of 2013. And this one fell off this hand came off in August of 2013. And then September was when I had to amputate both my legs. So that entire 2 years was extremely tough. Because, you really have no idea what is going to happen to you. And your transition from being somebody able-bodied, somebody independent, somebody who completely was in charge of my life, from there to then go to 2 years where you need help for everything, whether it is a glass of water or go to the bathroom or to have food or anything, right? Like even the smaller things in life, when you need help, it can become a very life changing experience, right? Because it really brings you at the very lowest level. There's also a huge ego that you have to deal with, because you feel that you're independent all your life, and then to have somebody to help you with some of the most basic things in your life is extremely traumatic. So obviously I went through a whole 2-year phase where I didn't know, like I didn't even know if I will go through amputation. I didn't know if I was going to get better. Somewhere there was a hope that maybe I might get better and life will go back to what it was. So obviously, like, you're going through all of that in 2 years, and the 2 years is completely like, now when I think back, I really have no idea how I went through it. But like, you really don't know, right? The sense of uncertainty is more than anything else for any of us to deal with. So from there to then go through amputation, and then to have to associate with the word disability, right? It's not something that any of us are taught. Like none of us are ever taught to say that, at some point you're going to be disabled. So for me to go from there to being addressed as somebody with a disability was a huge transition. And there were so many times where I just thought that I should have died, or I should just figure out a way to kill myself, because it wasn't worth living. But of course, then, the prosthetics came along. And then you kind of go through the motions of the uncertainty to what is going to happen to life. And I said that, like you said very rightly, it's easier said than done. It didn't happen in a click of a button. It wasn't like one day I woke up and said, woohoo, wow, I'm a person with a disability. It didn't happen that way. It's a very slow transition, and it takes, you have to go through the crying, the feeling terrible, the depression, the awfulness of what has happened, the feeling of frustrations, of feeling like you're a burden on everybody. Like, we don't talk about that a lot as people with disabilities, but I think that is something that we constantly struggle with, is the fact that, oh my God, we're such a burden on other people. And to be able to go through that entire process, and I remember this very well. My father-in-law, so he one day came up to me, and this is my husband's dodappa, actually. And he's probably was in his 80s at that point in time, and he's this very he was a farmer. So all his life he tilled his land. He was very successful as a farmer. And then he had like a little accident where he broke his back. And then, he couldn't do farming for very long. And then when he came and he sat next to me, he told me, Tuma jasti yochne madbeda. Okay, I think the internet connection is gone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're coming through.
Okay.
It's not very good, but you're coming through.
Yeah. And then he told me he told me that, ತುಂಬಾ ಬೇಜಾರ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೇಡ, ಬೇರೆಯವ್ರು ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತ, ಡೋಂಟ್ ಬ್ರೇಕ್ ಯೋರ್ ಹೆಡ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ಇಟ್. ಹಿ ಸೆಡ್, ಅದ್ ಅವ್ರ ಹಣೆ ಬರ, ಅದ್ ಅವ್ರು ನಿನ್ಗೆ ಏನೋ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು ಹೋದ್ ಜನ್ಮದ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಮ್ಮ, ಅವ್ರು ನಿನ್ ಋಣ ತೀರ್ಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸೊ for me, maybe that kind of like, somewhere it hit, because the feeling of that burden is for some extent goes away, because it was easy to make peace with the fact that maybe they owed you something from your previous life, right? So yeah, so it's been that journey. But once I got my prosthetics and once I got a little back on my feet, I think to some extent I started to feel that, life's not going to be so bad. And somewhere it also became that, okay, no matter what, we have to lead a good life, we're not going to give up on this. And then once the running came through, then it, moved me from the 0 to 100, right? Because that whole, to be able to not even be able to walk and then to be able to run 10 kilometers is huge, because it somehow takes control back of your body. You somehow feel in charge. You somehow feel like, you can get through the rest of your life. So I guess, so that was the entire process. Having said that, it's not like today I'm always like cheerful and everything. Of course, even today I have my moments where I feel terrible and I cry, and I'm thinking like, why me? Why did this happen? Why could my life just be normal like anybody else's? And you go through that even now, and it's okay to acknowledge that. I feel, that it's okay to feel terrible about what has happened. You're human, and it's only natural for you to feel that way.
Yeah, that's also part of the process of acceptance, I suppose. Yeah, that you make peace with the fact that you also are comfortable with reliving it in one sense, and not really, and actually bringing out the emotions. I mean, that helps in one sense, I suppose. Uh, I also read that blog. In blog ಒಂದು ಓದ್ದೆ, where you talk about that disability card ಅಂತ disability ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಿಮಗೆ you felt very bad ಅಂತ ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ. I saw that blog. I've been reading up a little bit so that I can you know sound a little intelligent during the conversation.
Yeah, you sound like we know each other.
Yeah. So that's the whole idea of doing a conversation rather than you know. So I did read that. I think where you talk about how you struggled with, you didn't want to show the disability card, right, in the airport. I mean, I could relate to that in one sense when you were speaking just a moment ago. I'm disabled ಅಂತ ನಾನು ತೋರ್ಸ್ಕೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ತರ you had that. Yeah.
ತುಂಬಾ like disabled ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ for very long, ನಾನು ಶಾಲ್ ಹೊತ್ಕೋತಿದ್ದೆ, ಕೈ ಯಾರು ನೋಡ್ಬಾರ್ದು ಅಂತ. ಇಲ್ದಿದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಜನ ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಂತ you feel terrible about it. So it's a while, it takes you a bit to get used to it, alva.
So let's step back a little. I think you touched upon, you answered so many questions. I'll be soon running out of questions now. So, but stepping back a little, you spoke about why me. You briefly touched about why me. So the rickettsial mods itself is a very rare infection, and even in those who do get infected with it, not everyone suffers as much as you did. There are people who, I mean, who do get a bit, So and you picked it up while you were on a holiday. That adds to the whole trauma. So the trauma and the associated loss can be terrible across the physical, emotional, and all of those dimensions. So I just wanted to know, perhaps there are others also who go through that. So could you share some of the experiences of how you felt while going through? You touched upon that a little bit, but further in terms of when it actually dawned on you. I think one thing ಆಯ್ತಲ್ಲ, holiday ಅಂತ ಬಂದ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ತಿಂಗಳು ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತು.
I went for a holiday in February. I came back in March. So 1 month ನಾನು ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಟೀರಿಯಾ ತುಂಬಾ ಸಂತೋಷವಾಗಿದ್ವಿ ಒಂದೇ ಬಾಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ then end of March the bacteria was like, hello, I have to tell you I exist very well. So adadmele tumba jwara bandittu. It was very high fever, and blood test ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ, and I was also pregnant at that point in time, alva. So the doctors initially were and everything. Okay, have I lost you all again?
No, you're cutting in and out, but we still have you. So think you froze now. Yeah.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're coming.
So the fever started, and they thought because I was pregnant that it's normal to have fever, right? So the doctor initially said that, just crocin, attagoli, and that's about it. And then I got progressively worse. And that was when they decided that they were going to do the blood test. When they did the blood test, the platelet count was very low. So then they assumed it was probably dengue or malaria. So that was how I got into the hospital, because we thought it was dengue or malaria. But also the situation was that from there, then I moved into the ICU. I had a multi-organ failure. I was on a life support system for a week, but the doctors didn't think I was going to make it at all, because the infection was really bad. And I think the challenge also was that rickettsial, the bacteria was something that they knew for sure. It took them a while to figure out and figure the steps out. And I think, like, when I woke up from from the coma, was when I noticed that all the hands and legs had turned a different color. But avaglono, it doesn't strike you that everything, you're going to lose all the limbs, right? Science and technology has come so much forward that you think that matre kodtare, you're going to become fine, and then you're going to go on with life. So yeah, so that was like pretty much the sequence. And then I think the doctor at the hospital told me that I might have to lose all my limbs. But even then, I think ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ತುಂಬಾ ಸಿನಿಮಾ ನೋಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಈ ಸಿನಿಮಾದಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನದಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರೋ ಹಿಂಗ್ ಗಂಟೆ ಹೊಡಿತಾರೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ ಸೀನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಹಿಂಗ್ ಮಿರಾಕ್ಯುಲಸ್ ಆಗಿ ಎದ್ದೋಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಯು ಗ್ರೋ ಅಪ್ ಆನ್ ಆಲ್ ಆಫ್ ದಟ್ ಅಲ್ವಾ? ಸೊ ಸಮ್ವೇರ್ ಅದೊಂದು ಫಿಲ್ಮಿ ಇದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೋ ಒಂದ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಹೋಪ್ ಇತ್ತು. But I guess 2 years is good enough time to feel that, okay, maybe it's not going to happen, right?
So, Blade Runner. So how did that come about, and how did you train to become a runner? I also read in that blog. So I must tell you that you did not run before this whole thing happened.
No.
You weren't a runner.
No.
So why running? Why a Blade Runner? And how did all this happen? A marathoner, bronze medal. How did this happen? How does it? No, I'll ask the next question later. I'm dumping. So, yeah.
I think, like, I didn't like you said very rightly, I was never a runner. Oh, what the hell, man.
No, you're coming through. I can hear you.
Coming through? Okay. So no running, no reference point. I think school level ali, you have that house ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತೀರಾ, blue house, red house, white house. ಆ ಒಂದ್ ವರ್ಷಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದ್ಸರಿ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಡೇ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಅದ್ ಸುಮ್ನೆ ನಾವು ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲೂ ನಾಟ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ you're a good athlete or anything. ಆ ಗುಂಪಲ್ಲಿ out of the worst, you're probably the best, so you get to run. And that is the only thing with running or anything like that with sports. So once I was bedridden for 2 years, and then I put on channa gundukagbittite, because you're sitting nicely, you're eating, you're not moving around, you're doing nothing. And when I started to wear the prosthetics was when I learned that it makes sense to be lighter, because you're carrying the prosthetic itself weighs a lot, right? So it's easier for you to maneuver on your prosthetics if you're lighter. So that was when I started to figure out that, maybe I needed to lose the weight that I had put on. And, I started walking. I, went to the gym, but the gym people also didn't know what to do with me. They'd never seen anybody like me before in the gym. So they didn't know what to do with me. So, I started walking a bit, and then a friend knew my coach, and he said that, listen, you know what, why don't you just go meet him? So we just went, like, generally to meet him. We didn't even think that it will come through. And when I met coach, the first thing he said is that, see, I have never worked with somebody like you. He works with elite athletes. So he was like, okay, but you come, we'll see what we can do. So initially when we went, I think ask at that point in time was only to be able to walk, maybe climb stairs, sit in a chair, get off a chair. Those are your expectations. You're not expecting to do anything. But I think, like I said earlier, the fact that you are able to push your body when it's not designed to do any of that, it gives you a certain amount of inner joy. There's a certain amount of confidence that comes through. So as I kept walking, coach started to push me to say that, okay, today you've done 10 rounds, tomorrow you'll do 20 rounds, then 20 rounds, you have to do it only in 20 minutes. So that kind of like, there was a goal that was given, and working with that goal, I really began to enjoy it. And maybe like about 7, 8, 9 months later, once the walking was getting much better, we slowly figured that we could run, and we were very excited that, oh, it's possible anta ala. And then we started to, then coach said, okay, then let's try running. And I don't think like we ever thought, I think he came up with the idea first that, let's run this TCS run. Nan ankonde coach definitely huchagbittidare avaga, because who will want me to run? Like, here people with legs are not able to run. Why would you expect me to do it? But and then one day he said, come, we're going to I think one Saturday he called me and said, today we're going to try running this 10 kilometers in the stadium itself. And I really didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And but I remember him pushing me to do it, and we completed that day, which is about, I think, about 25 rounds in Kantirava Stadium. And when I finished that, I remember how I felt. I felt like I had won the Olympics. Like, it was as good as that, right? And like I said, I don't enjoy running, but I enjoy the person that I am after I run. So I think that's what got me into the whole space. And then from once we were able to do that, then the blades came along, and then we ran the TCS twice. And then, we totally enjoyed it from there. And then coach said, coach is mad, I think. And coach was like, come on, let's do sprinting, because I think there's potential there. Then we did sprints. And like today, I think I think it's a lifesaver. I think it's really saved me. It's brought back my soul. It's lifted me up from the worst parts of my life, right? It's made me feel confident back again, which I think I would have struggled to if I didn't have running. So I think that's how the whole running thing happened.
And how did the bronze medal happen then? How did the bronze medal and the gold medal? Yeah.
Bronze medal happened in 2018. Mm-hmm. That we went to Panchkula in Chandigarh. So there was the nationals that happened. So we got the selection from state and we went there. But when we went there, obviously I'm the only blade runner among women. There aren't blade runner women who run at an athletic level. So I had to be combined with women with issues with their leg. Right? Because not necessarily, so they either have, slightly outward feet or inward feet, or, one leg is smaller or shorter, or, so I had to be clubbed with them because there aren't any. And that's how I came third the first time that I ran, which kind of was good. It made me feel a lot more confident. Then we took it a lot more seriously, right? Because if you want to run internationally, then there's a classification process that you have to go through. So I went to China for that. I got my classification, because then you are classified to run under a particular category. And then, we've done a few competitions. The gold happened earlier this year, because we didn't have one last year because of the whole Corona situation. So this year they managed to have one in Bangalore, and then that's how the gold happened. Yeah.
So, okay, so these are questions that come from absolutely no knowledge about these. So how does it feel to how does it feel to walk on blades?
Blades. It is like, okay, I'll describe this because I know what this I've done.
It's also a question that's come up in the chat, so
so it feels like you're wearing very high heels. Okay, you're on extremely high heels, and then you're on a trampoline. You know the trampoline that goes up and down like that.
Springy.
So
effect.
yeah, so that's what it feels like to be on a blade. But it makes running very easy. So because you it helps you push forward when you run.
Okay, but you use it only for running, I assume, right? No, it's
Yes,
not,
yeah. I mean, you can, of course, use it to walk and stuff like that. It's not a problem. The only thing with the blades is you can't stand still because the blades are shaped like this, Alva. They're like in a U shape at the bottom. So which basically means you're going forward and backward. So you can't stand still. So it's not like I can stand on both and stand still for any point in time. So this constant movement for you to stay in balance. So that's the only challenge, right? So if you're wearing blades, you can't stand and have a conversation with someone because there's a lot of movement.
But is it better than a typical prosthetic limb in terms of getting used to getting the pain and all of that?
See, like obviously, like I think wearing the prosthetics and getting used to it is another process in itself because it takes a while for you to get used to it. Because I remember initially when I used to wear, there's a lot of swelling in your stump. There's a lot of blisters. So initially when I started off, I would only wear the blades. Wear my prosthetic once in every 2 days or 3 days. But then over a period in time, you build it. Like from 10-15 minutes, you go to 20 minutes, half an hour, and then you increase the time that you spend on the prosthetic. But like give it a year and a half or so, then it's almost like an extended part of your limb, right? You get used to it as part of your life. So for sure it was easier that way. Then when you transition from the normal prosthetic to the blade was a different story for me because it's a different it's different for you to kind of figure the dynamics of running, your body balance, to make sure that you don't fall. And with me, I think the disadvantage also is because I'm a quad amputee, that if I fell, I can very rarely support myself off. It means that I fall flat on my face, right? If I had the arms, then I had a better chance of not really like falling all out. So I think there was an additional challenge there, but I think I've been very lucky. Like in the initial years, I was one of those people on my prosthetic that never fell. I think I've only been falling recently, but other than that, like Munche, when I started out, like I hardly ever fell.
There's a question here says ತಮ್ಮ ಈ ಸಾಧನೆಗೆ ಪ್ರೇರಣೆ ಯಾರು ಹೇಗೆ?
Prerane, I think, it's very difficult for me to point one person's name and say, ki, yuru prerane, avaru prerane anta. I think if you can't find the prerane within yourself, it's a big problem because I think somewhere the will to want to live, the will to lead a good life, the will to live to the fullest of your potential comes from within. So I think somewhere the motivation to want to live well comes from within. And of course, I had a beautiful support system, whether it was Appa, Amma, my sister, my husband, or my friends. I think they did a fantastic job of keeping me supported and making me feel loved and making me feel like the disability doesn't really make a lot of a difference, right? So I think that really helped. And like even like my family, like 10 kilometer ಓಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳೋವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಯಾರು ಯಾಕಮ್ಮ ಇಂತ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ ಅಂತ ಯಾರು ಹೇಳೇ ಇಲ್ಲ. They were like, okay, let's do this. So I think I've been lucky, very very lucky that way, very very blessed.
Okay, so I just want to make a little segue into some of into another section. There are some who are born with a disability. They're born disabled, and others like yourself.
Correct.
So in one sense, you have seen both sides of the world. So even if it is the same world, have your perspectives on what the world is and what life is or is not, has that changed? And what is that change that you see?
I think, I'll tell you this, like, this is what I think, and I don't know if this is the right or the wrong answer. I think because I was disabled midway through my life, I was disabled when I was 32, right? So I had the opportunities of going to a school, to have an access to an education, which have access to a workspace, and nowhere the disability was an impediment, right? I didn't have to think twice because my disability held me back. So for me, I think it's allowed me to naturally become confident, to not, to not think twice about all of that, right? And having an education and being financially independent brings you certain privileges. So I think therefore then the transition from there to being somebody with a disability, I think the privileges really help you transition very well. So I think if I was Shalini that grew up in a village in some rural area in Karnataka, I don't think my life would have been the way it is today. Right? I'm very, very conscious of the fact that it would have been, maybe it could have been, but it would have been much harder than what it is today. Right? Because I had access to prosthetics. I was able to spend the money that I wanted for my prosthetics to run or whatever, which is not easy for a lot of people. So definitely I think that makes a difference. So I think if our infrastructure, if our structures, if our accessibility within our country was different, I think being a person being born with a disability wouldn't necessarily have affected you as much, I feel. But I think, let's be honest, I don't think as a country we're there is as yet, and we have a long way to go. So I think that challenges would come along. But I really don't know the answer to that, whether is it better to have been born. But on the other side that I look at it this way is that I've seen people who are born with a disability have accepted it. They have figured out how to deal with their life in that space, right? Like whether it is like I know of people who've lost their hands, for example. They use their legs a lot to eat, to cook, and you see a lot of those videos, Alva. I don't think I can ever do that, right? Like even like I've met a lot of people who don't have both their hands, but they do such a brilliant job of eating on their own with their spoons and all of that. And I have tried it, but I fail at it miserably. Like I just cannot do it. And even when I've tried it, I just get so frustrated by the process that I'm willing to give up on it. So that way, when I see when you're born with a disability, maybe your coping mechanisms and maybe your ability to adapt is a lot more faster and easier. But when it happens midway through, then there are challenges that come through with that. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think somewhere the point is about how willing are you of your disability and wanting to do something about it? Like how can you really want to push yourself? And somewhere I think it's about also not being apologetic about being disabled. I think as people with disability, we're taught to be very apologetic. That oh ಹಿಂಗ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತಲ್ಲ ಪಾಪ ಅಲ್ಲ, like ಇಷ್ಟು ಕಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ ಅವ್ರ ಜೀವನ.
Are you taught, or do you think that it comes from a deep sense of most people, as I see it, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ sympathetic ಆಗಿ deal ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಇವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ. Sometimes maybe people like you actually feel that you don't want the sympathy in one sense, right? And is that something that you also relate to? There are several questions in the chat box also which I'll pick up.
I don't understand. I think sympathy comes from a position of power. Right?
Absolutely.
Sympathy, but empathy is different, because empathy is, meeting me at my eye level and thinking that the only difference between you and me is the fact that I'm not, that my circumstances are different. So I think that makes a lot of difference.
I quickly challenge you on that also. Even empathy is difficult because I really don't know how you feel. I mean,
I don't mean that you need to feel what I feel. I think the distinction is that you need to figure out that you and I are not too different. It could be just a click of a button and my life could be yours.
Right.
It's just that much. It's not that you need to understand what I'm going through. It's very difficult for you, anybody, to understand what I've gone through.
Absolutely. I agree that life is a toss of a coin. I mean, let's see. So there is one question that's come up. It's rather an observation. I think one asking, are these kind of bacterial infections common? I know that there is in the Southeast Asia, it's very common, as also in South America, I think, where the Rocky Mountains.
It's usually where it usually exists in very mountainous regions, is what I've heard. But I've heard like there are instances of it in like the hilly regions of Assam. When I had gone for one of my conversations in Guwahati, there was a doctor that I met who said that actually it is and very surprisingly he told me that it's all it takes is a 10 rupees medicine to solve this issue. So it's not even like a life-saving drug. If the prognosis is early, all it takes is a medicine worth ₹10. So
I think doxycycline is an antibiotic that's used big time. So
I guess it's about the time and where you
yeah,
are.
it's about the time. If you don't catch it early, I think
Yeah.
it leads to severe. I think some of the questions which you seem to have touched is from where do you get all of this energy? You seem so excitable, so cheerful, and all of that. So
Adu
yeah,
DNA problem. DNA problem.
Problem is okay. So it's a DNA. Yeah.
I think like even if you had met me pre-disability, I was like this. So it's not that I've changed. I think maybe the good part is that maybe disability has not changed me.
Okay, so there are a couple of people who saying, I am disabled and want to get into sports as well, which is my dream. So can you share your number? That is, they're asking if they can get in touch with you.
They can email me. I can
Right.
drop my.
Sure.
I'll just drop my email ID. Anybody wants can send me an email, and then we can take it forward from there. I think I would prefer that than sending my email phone number out to everybody.
Because at least 3 people who have asked that same question.
Sure. I'm just putting it up in the chat window. So, so then, anybody who wants any information or anything like that can write to me.
Okay, there's also an observation that says, general observation, it says, I'm just curious. So, there seems to be that, people with physical disability tend to choose sports as their field of expression or other excellence or whatever. So, any particular thoughts on that? I think this is purely anecdotal. I don't know if there is any actual analysis that goes to show that people with. But is it got to do? Let me just seed some thought into you. Has it got to do with the fact that you want to prove that you are not physically not able to do something? Has that got anything to do with it at all?
Okay, like the way I look at it, I have a different perspective as well, right? That I think a lot of people with disability in India take up sports also because it's an option to get jobs. Because if you can be a medal winner, then you have option with government jobs, right? So it is one avenue for becoming financially independent for sure. So I think that, and then, there is a lot of NGOs that are involved. So, when there is a state meet, national meet, they like to take people with disability along in there. Out of that, maybe some of them turn out to be very good, and then they picked up and then they trained, right? I don't know if people with disability take up more of sports. I think maybe because we've just come off an Olympics, and the Paralympians came up with a lot of awards. I think it's kind of fresh in everybody's head, but I think there is an equal number of people who are artists or musicians, Beethoven, there's just so many people who are able to excel in other fields as well. So I'm not really, I don't know, I'm not really, I wouldn't agree as much that it's probably to do with sports, but like you very rightly said, it could also be about, establishing control over your own body, right? It's what we feel that, can empower us.
Okay, so I think there's a question that did come up on the chat, but I'll club it with another thing that one of the questions has to do with it's a cliche, but it's a question that most people ask. Ella program ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ತರ ಬಂದಾಗ ಈ inclusion ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. So and inclusion ಗೆ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ? What should we do to ensure that we become a more inclusive society? And I also wanted to club it with what you are doing with Adventures Beyond Barriers Foundations. I think you're an ambassador, right? For that.
Yes. Yeah. So, what can we do to see, like what Adventure Beyond Barriers does, obviously, is they look at adventure to become an inclusive space for people with disability. So the way they work with is they do these various cycling expeditions, they do treks, they do a lot of adventure sports, which is a combination of having people with disability and able-bodied people in the same space. Because if you think about it, what was the biggest equalizer for all of us? It was the playground, alva, where we went to play, and you made friends, you figured it out. And using adventure sports as a way to let people, so if you meet people in that space, you realize it can become a very equalizer. It can make people feel that, oh, there's nothing so wrong about it, right? That's one part of the answer. But for me, I think inclusion should start within schools. I think until that can happen at that level, where when I mean schools, I somehow feel that, unless there is a special need that needs to be addressed, I feel like, if we can have all our teachers trained to handle all kinds of children, and if we went to a school where there were children with disability, then we naturally become a lot more inclusive. We're not looking at it as somebody very different. And, your exposure to having people with disability around, you don't see this as something, it becomes part and parcel of our lives. Like, for example, when I went to school, if I had a teacher that was blind that taught me, or if I had a teacher in a wheelchair that came up and taught me, then I wouldn't associate, I wouldn't think twice if I went to work and I saw somebody with a disability. And I think that's our problem today, right? That we don't have spaces where everybody coexist in the same space. And it's a matter of structures, right? The structures that we have within the school, within our buildings, all of that adds on to that. And then, of course, the whole mindset that we perpetuate. And obviously, because of all these factors, people with disability have a larger tendency to stay within the four confines of their wall. And therefore, in the world, like, they say 10% of India's population is disabled. So that puts us at about what? Like a crazy amount of number, right? But you go to the roads, or you go to a movie theater, or you ask yourself the question when you went to school or college, how many people with disability were there in your class? So if there were 100 people, 10 of them should have been disabled, Alva. But you don't see that. And the fact is that because you don't see too many people out with disability, then the infrastructure, all of that gets affected. So for me, I feel if you had to be inclusive, for sure, getting the education space to be more inclusive is what is going to work to make a change to some extent. But how quickly can that happen? Matter of privileges, all of that it's a big issue, and I don't think we can answer that question over a webinar.
Right. Yeah. There's also another thing that you engage with, the Saviors of the Soul NGO. Is that?
Yes. So I work with the Saviors of Soul, which is an NGO that works with rehabilitation of sex workers or children of those of sex workers, and provide them with alternate occupation, various, either skill enhancement or giving them different work options. And that's something that I work with the Saviors of Soul. But I think I do a terrible job with it. Like, I get very little time to do something, I feel.
Okay. I think Mr. Sampath Kumar has just messaged me saying that he would like to ask you the question directly.
Sure.
If he can, he could unmute himself, or if he can't, I would request Ankachari or somebody to unmute him and go ahead and ask the question. Mr. Sampath Kumar, you wanted to? Okay, I think, yeah.
Hello.
Okay, I think you should be able to. Yeah, I think you should be able to.
Yeah. Now I could do that.
Yeah.
I prefer not to be on the screen. Sorry. Shalini, I just can't tell you how much, I have liked this interaction and conversation with you. And thanks, Ramesh, for bringing her on and speaking. Some of the things which you said were excellent. I'm associated with an organization called RT Lab. I'm not sure whether you have heard of them. In that, we are trying to sort of create, entrepreneurs who would exclusively make products for this and make a business out of it and prove to the world. And things like which you said, that in the school, if you had teachers with us, if you had fellow students who are disabled, then our own sensitization would have been so high. And we would have learned to treat, because if 5 to 10% of the people are like that, how come we don't get to see them in our own lives? That way we get cocoon and things like that, which is a brilliant way of bringing out the fact, and I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Thank you so much.
I would be interested to sort of take this further. And would you be associated with this Association of People with Disabilities in Bangalore by any chance?
No, sir.
APD as an organization? No. Okay. Okay. I thought they were doing great work. Perhaps one of the reasons I just wanted to check this is to share my happiness. And you wouldn't know how much I've become a person with better, appreciation today, even though I've been working in the artificial limb and other side part of it for almost now 10 years. I just can't express my things. That's why I requested Ramesh to sort of continue. I think we will take other things offline.
Sure,
thank you.
have. I think I've put my email ID in the text box. You can connect with me if you're in Bangalore. Happy to do that. I'm not part of any association. Like maybe I think I'm a very selfish person. I think that way. Like I like my spaces. I like to do what I do when I. But we can catch up for sure.
You are not very unlike me. I refuse to be part of any association. That gives me the freedom.
I didn't want to really say that out loud, but like I just find it very exhausting sometimes, and
not only exhausting. Just to share with you, I've always found that once you form an organization and you have to define some boundaries, as an individual, there is so much to contribute by associating. But becoming closely associated with one organization, in some ways you get restricted. Not that it is wrong or something like that, but unless you are fully committed to that organization, and whatever it is, an organization gives you tremendous amount of backup, but at the same time, it also acts as a drag on you. Like you said about a lot of your time and all that stuff. And I'm so happy that you are free, and you can. I am also a person who never gets associated, excepting I associate for their purpose, and some resource comes from my side, which enhances their work, which is good. I mean, that's the way I operate, and I'm so happy to know that we are now.
When I just became disabled, I joined a couple of these WhatsApp support groups for amputees, and I didn't really enjoy that experience at all, because you would wake up in the morning, and and to be fair to them, maybe they're going through their own journeys, right? And they would talk about being in pain and how the prosthetic wasn't working, and like I just felt like that was not the space I wanted to share, and and I felt very terrible about leaving that group, because I just thought I was being such a snob, but it just wasn't working for me. And to be fair, like I think each to their own, and everybody's going through their own journeys, but I wasn't in that journey there, so I think that's where I've been very wary, I think. But we'll catch up for sure.
I'm sure that you can do much more work by just being independent and exploring all possibilities. Just to let you know, one of the what it triggers, why I'm looking forward to speaking to you, is what it would trigger for us, because one of the persons who had come during it's an innovation and incubation center, this RT lab. He created.
Is this in Alsur? Is this the one in Alsur?
Alsur station, yes. It used to be.
I've been there. Mr.
Mohan Sundaram.
Mohan Sundaram. Yes, I have been there. I've met Mr. Mohan Sundaram.
Also, yeah. Now we are located in Singapore, and know that they prepared one instead of the blade one. They had made one with cane. And somebody used it too, and the world record for fastest running in anything without gives you additional advantage like blade. That person holds the record, and it was very nice to hear. And it was triggered by somebody who just wanted to do something in that work. So
Mr. Arun Cherian.
Correct, Cherian.
Yes,
brilliant.
Cherian and me are friends.
Oh, lovely.
Small world.
Yeah. So
thank you. Over to you, Ramesh.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Sampath. Yeah. Okay. So I'll need to do a little bit of. Okay, we were talking about your your work with, I know we weren't talking about that, but that's the next place I wanted to go to. But your work with sex workers, I think gender-based violence. Do you engage a lot, or is that something that
No, it's kind of limited, which is what I
Right.
said. Like I think there was a group of women that had come through, and I worked with the NGO for a bit. The girl who runs the NGO is a friend of mine, so I think my support is mostly from a very financial status
Right.
perspective, as in when I can, because if I am part of conversations, sometimes I just move my funds to them, and that's how I've been able to support. In some cases, yes, I've met some of the women and had a conversation, and that's about it. But I've not been necessarily involved like in the hardcore rehabilitation of them.
Okay, so that's good. So I think we've covered most of it, except a few things that I wanted to touch upon. Is there something that uh, you wanted to share, particularly? This group is a mixed group. I think what the audience that we have people who are working in the space of disabilities. That there are people who are also disabled themselves, and who are, and have gotten over it, and started to get back on get back on their feet in a sense, and also others who are invested in this whole area, as well as interested in this area. So is there something that you wanted to share that you think would mean? I think people are even asking for your social media profiles and other things. I don't know what they say.
Yes, yeah, I'm on Instagram. Facebook is for limited to friends only. But
Right.
Instagram, yes, you can follow me. I think I follow under the handle of Shalini Saraswati itself. So it's not going to be so different to find me. And good, like I need followers. So the numbers look good.
Yeah. It's a
um,
followers game.
yeah, it's a followers game.
Yeah.
But what is the message? I just think that's I think um, I think Corona is, if you have not been disabled, then I think Corona has taught us all about um, how just like how small a bacteria or a virus can really change all our lives, right? And that's about it. That um, nothing's really in our control. Nothing is there that we feel like we're going to live for the next 20 years, next 40 years. We're going to do that when we retire. We're going to do this when we retire, or we're going to buy that house. We're going to buy that car. All of those things, and I feel that none of those things really matter when you're bedridden for 2 years, or when you're deciding to lose all your limbs. None of that really matters at all. I think it'll all that matters is how well you're able to lead your life, and how well you can try and live to the best of your potential. Like I read this somewhere, which says that if you were to ask someone what are the best things in your life, you're not going to talk about your car or your bank balance or any of these things. It's mostly going to be about your child. It's going to be about your family. It's going to be about your friends. It's going to be about memories. It's going to be about loved ones. So every time I feel, and I think Maya Angelou said this, that every time you're building your legacy, and your legacy is giving someone the hope, or being able to share your love with them. So I just hope all of us can get over everything that we're fighting about these days, and lead like a happy life. I just get very upset when we spend all our time and energy on these unnecessary rubbish that we go through in our lives. Yeah.
So you have a fan.
Your smile is
Your smile is
contagious.
so
Okay, thank you. Colgate advertisement next time.
Yeah, that's the so, so they found the new brand ambassador.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I just wanted to you spoke about being selfish. I just wanted to make a point. I think the most selfless people are actually the most selfish. In order to be selfless, you need to be selfish.
Okay, that's quite a deep one, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, it's impossible for anyone to be selfless if they are not selfish. I mean, it starts with you, right? I mean, if you can't,
Yeah.
if you, yeah, so it's a good space to
True.
be. Just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you. Makes me feel better.
So about the that pushed me off what I was going to ask you next. Specifically about one of the things that I wanted to touch upon when you spoke about Corona and about how life is so ephemeral, like you mentioned. It's a toss of a coin, and that was also very deep in the sense you took all of us into deep waters in that sense. But the idea is it's so very difficult to lead life like that. So I think I hope everybody who's here on this conversation understands that what you said makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't actually make sense in life, because you don't lead life in that understanding. You're going to get up tomorrow morning and actually look into your mobile phones and say, what is the next meeting that I have? What is the next thing that I'm going to do? What is it that I'm going to do? So in that sense, what you said makes a lot of sense, but people are still not going to be doing what you actually said. So that's it.
Yeah, I think, see, I'm not saying that we all have to become Swamijis, right? It's not that you're saying that I don't want anything in my life, nothing matters, all of that. I think it's about still going through your karma, going through what you want to accomplish, be able to do that. But I think somewhere along that, you also are able to take a step back and to be able to live your life, right? It can't be that you want to accomplish whatever you want to accomplish, but forget to live during that time. So you can't be 60 years old, think back and say that, damn, like maybe I should have done that, or maybe I should have done this, right? So there was this research that they did for people who were in a um, uh, what do you call that? A place where they people no people who are in a hospice. What do you call it?
Hospice, is it? Is that,
People who are almost going to die, and they need to be
Right.
looked after.
in fact, we run a hospice like that called the palliative care
Yeah.
center.
So when they did that and they asked people, they asked them that, what do they really regret in their life? I think people always regretted the things they did not do than the things that they did do. So I think somewhere, as far as we're conscious of that and be able to live today, right? Like, I think somewhere along the way, we've forgotten to enjoy the sunrises, the sunsets, the trees, the flowers, and being conscious of it, right? We're so angry about being stuck in a traffic jam, but then you can also enjoy the music on the radio. So
That's a good point to actually end this conversation. And I must thank you for having taken the time out. I think I thoroughly enjoyed every bit of this conversation, and I hope you did as well. And I hope
I did.
everybody, yeah, and I hope everyone who joined us as well enjoyed it. This happens once a month. I think there was a question in the chat box. This happens once a month. In addition, we also have conversations every week. There we discuss a range of subjects, and we bring in a range of different people onto those conversations. But this conversation, particularly called The Amazing Achievers, happens once a month. And the next one happens on October 9th. We also have a conversation on October 2nd. So this was thoroughly enjoyable. I think the chat is burning up with people, praising what you just shared with them and how you've inspired them. I hope, and I wish you the very best on behalf of all of us here, all of us at SVYM, all of us at We Lead, and all of us here, part of the CCSD program. And I hope.
Thank you so much. I totally enjoyed myself. Like, sometimes you're in these conversations where people want to ask you the same questions, right? What motivated you? Who is your inspiration? And then it gets kind of very
Cliche, yeah.
very cliche, but it's been interesting. I think it was an interview that made me think as well before I had to answer, and I think I thoroughly enjoyed all of the questions that everyone asked me. I wish everyone the very best, and I hope you can all find your own journeys and figure your way through the complex labyrinth of life. But I've given you my email ID. If someone wants to have a conversation or have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and you can follow me on Instagram. I need followers.
You will get quite a few followers. Don't worry about that. So that's going to happen immediately. I think you're going to have a flood of followers who are going to flood
Yes,
your
come on.
Instagram.
I'm stuck at
Instagram
1,800. I have to move to 2,000.
So you'll cross 3,000. Okay, so it's been wonderful. Have a so everyone have a great weekend, and Thank you everyone for coming on board.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Yeah. Bye-bye. And I must add, I think the next week we will be continuing this conversation. Therefore, in the next, not the next week, but the next conversation is with Ms. Ira Singhal, who's an IAS officer as well as a computer science engineer. And she will be in conversation. It happened on October 9th. There's a small change in the time because we'll be speaking to her between 5 and 6. It's because it's a Saturday. We also have another conversation between 7 and 8. So we'll have two conversations on October 9th. So thank you and have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you, Shalini, again.
Thank you.